Chapter 1: Moving Day. It was a bright and sunny day when the Smith family moved into their new home. John, his wife Sarah, and their two children, Emily and James, had been searching for the perfect house for months, and they had finally found it. The old Victorian-style mansion with its high ceilings, beautiful woodwork, and spacious rooms was everything they had ever wanted. As they pulled up to the house, the kids jumped out of the car and ran up to the front door, eager to explore their new home. John and Sarah followed, carrying boxes and furniture, excited to start their new life in this beautiful old house. After hours of unpacking and organizing, they finally collapsed into bed, exhausted but happy. The first day in their new home had been a success, and they couldn't wait to start their new life in this beautiful old house. But as they drifted off to sleep, a strange feeling washed over them. It was as if they were being watched, as if someone or something was lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. They shrugged it off, chalking it up to the stress of moving, and drifted off to sleep, unaware of the horrors that awaited them in the attic. Chapter 2: Discovering the Attic. The next morning, John woke up early and decided to explore the house. He wandered through the rooms, admiring the architecture and the old-fashioned details. As he made his way up to the third floor, he noticed a door that he hadn't seen before. Curiosity getting the better of him, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. Inside, he found a staircase leading up to a dark and dusty attic. The air was thick with cobwebs, and the only light came from a small window in the roof. John's curiosity was piqued, and he climbed the stairs to investigate. As he stepped into the attic, a cold breeze swept past him, causing him to shiver. The space was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and trunks, and John couldn't help but wonder what treasures might be hidden among them. He walked around the room, examining the items, and came across an old chest. It was covered in dust, but John could make out intricate carvings on the lid. Without thinking, he lifted the lid and peered inside. At first, all he saw was darkness, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized that something was moving inside the chest. Slowly, a shadowy figure began to emerge, its shape indistinct and ethereal. John's heart raced as he stumbled backward, knocking over a pile of boxes. The figure continued to materialize, its dark form taking on the shape of a human-like creature. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its arms reached out toward John. With a scream, John turned and ran down the stairs, fleeing from the attic and the terrifying shadow creature that lurked within. He burst into the bedroom, gasping for breath and pale as a sheet. Sarah and the kids rushed to his side, concern etched on their faces. John tried to explain what he had seen, but his words came out in a jumbled mess. All he could say was that something was in the attic, something that he couldn't explain. From that moment on, the family knew that something was wrong with their new home. They tried to ignore the feeling of being watched, but the unease only grew stronger as the days passed. They knew that they had to find out what was causing the strange occurrences in the house, and the attic seemed like a good place to start. Chapter 3: Uncovering the Past. Despite their fear, the family decided to investigate the attic further. They gathered flashlights and climbed the stairs together, their hearts pounding with anticipation and dread. As they reached the top of the stairs, they noticed that the chest that John had opened the previous day was now closed. They approached it cautiously, unsure of what they might find inside. John slowly lifted the lid, and this time, there was no movement, no shadow creature waiting to pounce. Inside the chest, they found old documents and letters, all yellowed with age. The family gathered around, reading the letters aloud to each other. They learned that the previous owners of the house had been a wealthy family, but tragedy had struck them, and they were forced to sell the house. The letters revealed a dark secret that had been hidden for years. The family had been involved in black magic, and they had conducted rituals in the attic, summoning demons and other dark entities. The family had paid a heavy price for their involvement in the occult, and their souls were forever bound to the house. The family realized that the strange occurrences in the house were not just a coincidence. They were being haunted by the ghosts of the previous owners, who were still trapped in the house, unable to leave. With this newfound knowledge, the family decided to take action. They sought out the help of a local paranormal investigator, who confirmed their suspicions and provided them with a plan to rid the house of the evil spirits. Together, the family and the investigator conducted a cleansing ritual, using sage, salt, and other tools to banish the spirits from the house. It was a harrowing experience, and they were all relieved when it was over. As the weeks passed, the family noticed that the house felt lighter and less oppressive. The feeling of being watched had disappeared, and they were finally able to relax in their new home. Although the experience had been terrifying, the family had gained a new appreciation for the power of the supernatural. They knew that they would always be careful and respectful of the spirits that may still exist in the world, and they were grateful for the opportunity to uncover the past and rid their home of its dark history. Chapter 4: A False Sense of Security. After the cleansing ritual, the family felt a sense of relief. The house no longer felt haunted, and they were able to go about their daily lives without fear. But their sense of security was short-lived. Strange things began to happen again, although this time, they were different. Instead of the feeling of being watched, the family started to hear unexplainable noises and footsteps in the hallway at night. They tried to ignore it at first, hoping that it was just their imagination. But the noises continued to persist, and they soon realized that they were not alone in the house. One night, while the family was watching a movie in the living room, they heard a loud crash coming from upstairs. John went to investigate, and he found that the attic door was wide open, even though he had locked it earlier that day. As he walked up the stairs to the attic, he felt a cold breeze blowing past him, and he could hear faint whispers in the distance. When he reached the top of the stairs, he saw that the chest that had contained the letters and documents was open again. John called the rest of the family to come and see, and they all stood there in shock, unsure of what to do next. The chest was empty this time, but they knew that something was wrong. They could feel it in the air, a sense of darkness that hung over the house like a thick fog. The family realized that they had been too quick to assume that the cleansing ritual had worked. They had let their guard down, and now they were paying the price. The evil spirits that had been banished were back, and they were stronger than ever. The family knew that they needed help again, but this time, they were hesitant to seek out the paranormal investigator. They didn't want to admit that they had been wrong, that the cleansing ritual had not worked. Instead, they turned to books and online forums, searching for any information they could find on how to deal with the supernatural. They tried every ritual and spell they could find, but nothing seemed to work. As the days passed, the activity in the house continued to escalate. Objects were moving on their own, and the family could hear disembodied voices whispering in the night. They were trapped, prisoners in their own home, and they didn't know how to escape. The family realized that they were in over their heads, and they were running out of options. They needed help, but they didn't know who to turn to. They were alone, with no one to help them but themselves. Chapter 5: Desperate Measures. The family had reached a breaking point. They were exhausted from the constant activity in the house, and they knew that they couldn't continue living like this. They needed to find a solution, and fast. After hours of research and brainstorming, they came up with a plan. They would perform their own exorcism, using all of the knowledge they had gathered from their online searches. The family gathered in the living room, and they began the ritual. They lit candles and incense, and they recited prayers and spells that they had found on various websites. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The house was silent, and the family felt foolish for thinking that they could perform an exorcism on their own. But then, they heard a low growl, coming from deep within the house. The candles flickered, and the air grew thick with a sense of unease. The family knew that they had awoken something dark and powerful. But they were determined to see the exorcism through, no matter what. As they continued with the ritual, the growling grew louder, and the air grew colder. The family felt a sense of dread washing over them, but they refused to back down. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the room, blowing out all of the candles and plunging the room into darkness. The family huddled together, their hearts pounding with fear. And then, they heard a voice, a deep and menacing voice that seemed to come from all around them. "You cannot banish me," the voice said. "I am too powerful." The family knew that they were in over their heads. They had underestimated the strength of the entity that they were facing, and now they were paying the price. But they refused to give up. They regrouped, lit the candles again, and continued with the exorcism. Hours passed, and the family was exhausted. They had recited every prayer and spell that they could find, but nothing seemed to work. And then, just when they were about to give up, something miraculous happened. The room filled with a bright light, and the air grew warm and peaceful. The family felt a sense of calm washing over them, and they knew that the entity had been banished. They looked around the room, and they saw that everything was back to normal. The candles were burning brightly, and the air was free of any malevolent presence. The family felt a sense of relief, but they knew that they could never let their guard down again. They had learned a valuable lesson, one that they would never forget. The supernatural was real, and it was more powerful than they could have ever imagined. Chapter 6: Lingering Effects. Despite the successful exorcism, the family could not shake off the effects of the supernatural experience. They had all suffered from lack of sleep and nightmares, and they found it hard to relax in their own home. The family also noticed that certain parts of the house still felt heavy with negative energy, as if the entity had left a lasting imprint on the property. They decided to seek the help of a professional, someone who was experienced in dealing with the supernatural. After a lot of searching, they finally found a reputable psychic medium who agreed to visit their home. The medium walked through the house, and she immediately picked up on the lingering energy. She told the family that the entity they had faced was not just a random spirit, but a powerful demon who had been summoned to the house by someone who had dabbled in the occult. The family was shocked. They had never considered the possibility that someone had intentionally summoned the demon. The medium explained that the demon had been banished, but that it had left a mark on the house and on the family. She advised the family to cleanse the house with salt and sage, and to perform daily meditations to protect themselves from any further spiritual attacks. The family followed the medium's advice, and they noticed an immediate improvement in the energy of the house. The heavy feeling lifted, and the family began to feel more at ease. But the lingering effects of the experience still remained. The family continued to suffer from nightmares, and they found it hard to trust the safety of their own home. They decided to seek the help of a therapist, someone who could help them process the trauma of their experience. The therapist was understanding and supportive, and she helped the family work through their fears and anxieties. She taught them coping mechanisms, such as deep breathing and grounding exercises, to help them feel more in control of their emotions. Slowly but surely, the family began to heal. They still had moments of fear and anxiety, but they were able to handle them more effectively. They knew that their experience had changed them forever, but they also knew that they had come out of it stronger and more resilient than before. They had learned to never underestimate the power of the supernatural, and to always trust their instincts when it came to the safety of their home and family. Chapter 7: The Return. Months had passed since the exorcism, and the family had settled back into their normal routine. They felt safe and secure in their home once again, and the memories of their supernatural encounter had faded into the background. But one day, the family woke up to find that something was not quite right. They noticed that certain objects in the house had been moved, and that there was an unexplained chill in the air. At first, they tried to dismiss it as their imagination, but as the days went by, the occurrences became more frequent and more unsettling. The family started to feel as though they were being watched, and they began to experience strange and unexplainable events. They heard footsteps in empty rooms, doors would slam shut on their own, and their electronics would turn on and off without explanation. They knew deep down that the entity had returned. Panic set in as the family realized that they were once again in the grip of the supernatural. They couldn't believe that the entity had found its way back into their home. They quickly reached out to the psychic medium who had helped them before. The medium immediately came to their aid, and she could feel the presence of the demon as soon as she walked through the door. The medium knew that the demon had returned to finish what it had started. She advised the family to vacate the house immediately and to leave the exorcism to the professionals. The family was heartbroken and terrified. They couldn't believe that they were being forced to leave their home again. But they knew that they had no other choice. As they left their home, they couldn't help but wonder how the demon had returned. They had followed all the instructions of the medium and the exorcist, and they had thought they were safe. But as they looked back at their home, they knew that they were not safe. The demon had found its way back, and they had no idea how to protect themselves from its wrath. Chapter 8: The Final Battle. The family sought out the help of another exorcist, this time a renowned expert in the field of demonology. The exorcist agreed to take on the case, but warned the family that this would be a dangerous and difficult exorcism. The exorcist spent weeks preparing for the battle, researching the entity and gathering the necessary tools and materials. Finally, the day of the exorcism arrived. The exorcist entered the home, accompanied by a team of assistants and the psychic medium. As they began the ritual, the demon revealed itself once again, causing chaos and destruction throughout the house. The family watched from a distance, terrified and helpless as the exorcist battled the demon. The demon fought back with all its might, using its powers to hurl objects at the exorcist and his team. But the exorcist was determined and skilled, and he continued to chant the necessary incantations and use the holy water and other tools to weaken the demon. As the battle raged on, the family could feel the energy in the room shifting. They could sense that the demon was losing its power, and that the exorcism was working. Finally, with a loud roar, the demon was banished back to the depths of hell, and the exorcist declared the house to be free of its influence. The family felt a wave of relief wash over them as they realized that the entity had finally been defeated. They were overjoyed to be able to return to their home once again, and to be able to sleep soundly at night. But they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced. They knew that they would always be wary of the supernatural, and that they would always be grateful for the bravery and expertise of those who had helped them banish the demon once and for all. Chapter 9: Aftermath. After the exorcism, the family tried to resume their normal lives. They spent hours cleaning up the mess left by the demon, repairing the damage to their home, and trying to forget the terror they had endured. However, they soon realized that things would never be quite the same. The experience had left them scarred, and they found themselves constantly on edge, jumping at every little sound and fearing that the demon would return. The family also found it difficult to explain their experience to others. They knew that many people would be skeptical, and they didn't want to be seen as crazy or delusional. As a result, they kept their experience largely to themselves, only confiding in a few close friends and family members who they knew would believe them. Despite the challenges they faced, the family also found a newfound appreciation for each other. The experience had brought them closer together, and they realized that they were stronger as a family than they ever could have been alone. They also became more spiritual, seeking comfort and guidance in their faith. They attended church regularly and sought out the counsel of their pastor, who had helped them through the exorcism. Although the family knew that they would never forget their experience, they eventually began to feel like they could move on with their lives. They found comfort in each other, in their faith, and in the knowledge that they had overcome something truly evil. And although they never wanted to go through something like that again, they knew that they were prepared to face any challenge that came their way, together.